Continuing completed classics. Fulfilling failed franchises. Reinvigorating reviled rehashes. It's the follow-up Showdown! With Paul Getz, Travis McMaster, and Lauren Pacorni.
Hello and welcome to the follow-up Showdown 2 Nerds in Quarantine, where we still give worthy second chapters to stories that don't have them. I am your host, Papa Alpha Uniform Lima Getz, and if this is the first time you're joining us, the way it works is we take a movie with either no sequel or a sequel that doesn't quite fill the first one's shoes and take our own separate shots at coming up with a better one. But in the end, only one can triumph. Or two can tie. Now, unfortunately, in these quarantine times, I have sadly gone solo. Travis and Lauren are going to take a little break from the show for a bit and hopefully come in when available. I look forward to the return and I wish them health and happiness. But that brings me to the good news, because our guests today are two of my very favorite people in the world, experts in entertainment consumption, and they both have very impressive resumes to boot, Steve Clemmons and Katie Hoyt. Hey guys, how are ya?
Hello.
Hey,
Thanks for having us.
Oh, thank you for being here.
What an intro.
And the movie that they have chosen for us to improve on today is 2004's Meet the Fockers, a sequel to the smash hit comedy Meet the Parents.
We interrupt this program for the summary of two films. Greg Focker is a male nurse who wants to propose to his kindergarten school teacher girlfriend, Pam. He overhears a conversation with her newly engaged sister, letting him know that he must first get her father's permission. So, on the weekend of Pam's sister's wedding, they go to stay at her parents' house, with Greg hoping he can make a good impression and get the permission he needs. But it turns out that her father, Jack Burns, is not the retired florist he claims to be, but rather an ex-CIA operative who is extremely judgmental and mistrusting of all of Pam's boyfriends. A series of unfortunate coincidences, escalating catastrophes, and snowballing lies told by Greg and others compound over the weekend to make Greg look worse and worse until they come to a head and he is ousted by the entire family, prompting Greg to fly back home. But after Pam calls Jack a jerk, he catches Greg at the airport where they clear everything up and he gives Greg permission to propose, and so he does. Also, Jack has a Himalayan cat named Jinx that he trained to use the toilet, and Pam has an ex-boyfriend that is clearly still in love with her, as well as preferred by Jack named Kevin, who is played by Owen Wilson. Meet the Fockers. It's 2 years later, and Greg and Pam still aren't married for some reason. They go with Jack and Dina, Pam's mom, to where Greg's parents live so everyone can meet for some reason. They also bring Pam's sister's baby along for some reason. Bernie and Roz Focker are polar opposites to the Burnses, a sex therapist and a house husband respectively, and things are embarrassing and intense for Greg, especially once two things happen. One, Pam finds out she's pregnant but doesn't want anyone to find out, and two, Jack becomes obsessed with proving that Greg fathered an illegitimate child with the Fockers' housekeeper. After Jack takes things too far by injecting Greg with truth serum in an effort to prove his theory, Jack is ousted by the family and further embarrassed by the knowledge that everyone has been told Pam is pregnant except him. Ultimately, Jack agrees to calm down and have more frequent sex with his wife, which is another subplot, and everything more or less works out. Then, Greg and Pam decide to get married that weekend for no reason, and Kevin arrives to perform the ceremony for no reason. Also, the Fockers' horny dog, Moses, is flushed down the toilet by Jinx and then sodomizes him.
Now, any particular reason you guys settled on this one?
Well, we're a couple, and I find that amusing.
I think we honestly landed on this one because we wanted to find a movie that we remembered was fine.
Yeah.
And didn't know the sequel to.
We don't agree on a lot of stuff, so if it was like something precious, like a movie that I loved, like it's just there's too many prerequisites of like, well, you both gotta like it, but hate the sequel, and that's hard to do for us.
Yeah.
Huh. So you didn't want to cause any turmoil in the household over over the movie that was chosen. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe another time. Yeah.
Mm. Good call. Good call. Sorry if anybody heard me take a sip. I'm drinking a very on-theme Tom Collins. And I don't know if you guys noticed, I'm wearing my cat shirt, which is the second time I've worn a cat shirt for an event with you guys. The other was seeing cats.
Well, you should also mention that when you say cat shirt, it's not like a costume from Cats. It is a shirt covered in pictures of cats.
That's true. I was hoping that of any of the cats on here, there would be a Himalaya because of Mr. Jinx, but there is not. So I'm not as on theme as I could be, I guess. Usually we start by talking about the first one. So you said you both liked it or felt similarly about it. How do you remember your experience with this movie?
So the first time I saw it was when it came out, and I was in high school. And it came out around the same time as the movie The Exorcist, the version you've never seen. And I was not 17 yet, so I couldn't get a ticket to go and see that, which I really wanted to. So I bought a ticket to meet the parents with a friend of mine in hopes that we would sneak in to see The Exorcist, the version you've never seen. That did not work. So we had to go and Meet the Parents, like, begrudgingly instead, which was not what we were going there to do. But we actually liked it. So
good.
It was a situation where I think we were very disappointed, but it was kind of like a better letdown than I think we were anticipating.
I had a very different experience with Meet the Parents, which was I was writing for my school newspaper at the time, my high school paper. And I was like desperate to get like a movie review because that was like something they gave to like their classmen. And I was like, I'll do anything. And they're like, we'll pick a movie, and Meet the Parents had just come out. So I was like, I'll do Meet the Parents. So I went on a Tuesday night with my notepad and
God.
and went to go see Meet the Parents solely with the purpose of giving a review for a movie that by the time it was printed would have been out for like 3 weeks or something. I did not like it. I mostly found it anxiety inducing, mostly just like watching like a man fight against a universe that's out to destroy him, which so I wrote a bad review, and then it was a smash hit, and my football coach read the review, and he just every day relentlessly for weeks would just be like, well, me and my girlfriend were gonna go see Meet the Parents, but we read a terrible review in the newspaper.
That really happened?
Yeah. and he was like, so I guess we have time to run a little bit longer. Like, so I years afterwards regretted that review, and I was like, it's too harsh on it. I just didn't know how to do proper film criticism. And now, all these years later, I think I got it. I think I got it right. Like, it induced anxiety, but didn't make me laugh enough to I don't know. I wasn't as big a fan of it as Katie.
I wouldn't call myself a fan. But I would say though that I when we had both watched it after this new time around, afterward we were like, oh, we both feel about it the same way we did initially, which I found interesting. So at least it's a consistent movie, I guess.
Yeah, it holds up in that.
Yeah, it does hold up in that way. But we definitely had thoughts about it for sure. I'm curious what you thought.
Well, I was a big old fan. I mean, I remember this being, well, I wanted to ask about going into it on a Tuesday, how crowded the theater was, because I remember this being like one of these event comedy movies, like There's Something About Mary, or This Is the End would be maybe, or Bridesmaids, like more modern versions of comedies that are these movies that are written in a way where they're trying to get a laugh every scene at least, but really the goal seems to be you're laughing from beginning to end.
Like, it's like every person who could see this movie is going to laugh at something at all times. Like,
right. And I feel like this one like the way it ends with Greg talking to the camera and can you deal with that? Like, I remember that being that type of thing where it was like, oh, I'm still laughing. They got me right at the end. Like, and I got really stoked on it. And I remember I saw it multiple times, and it was one of these things where I was like, I was very much on board the hype and like, you gotta go. It's hilarious. And I remember my mom went, and she's very analytical about things and would always ask about, like, especially when we disagreed, Like, now, honey, why did you like that? Like, you know, what did you like about that? Now, this was when I remember her liking okay, but I also remember being like, now, you realize that's ridiculous, right? And and I'm like, what do you mean it's ridiculous? Yeah, I mean, it's comedy, it's funny. And then she was like, well, there's no way anyone would stay through all that. They would leave, you know? And I was like, oh, but he loves her. He's a nice guy. He's trying to do it. I remember specifically having a debate with her that at the end, I remember her analysis being that video that Jack finds of Greg ruins everything again. You know what I mean? As if,
yeah, it's going to undo a lot of the progress he made because he kind of comes clean about a lot of stuff. And not that.
Your mom's right.
You find out that she watched the trailer. Yeah, she was right. And in retrospect, I realized that. I still won't give her that she was right about all these discussions, but that one I now see her point. Looking at it with more of an adult perspective, I definitely have a moment where I would have left if I was Greg. And so my question to you guys is, when would you have left? My mom's answer was when he breaks the urn.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's early.
That's very early, and I think I could have gotten past that. Because it seems like they forgave him well enough.
Yeah. I was thinking, I was like, I don't know if I'd leave after that, just because that's a great story to have in life. Like, yeah, this happened. I probably would have left, though, the next morning when everyone at the table, like when my fiance hadn't woken me up to get ready to go to, like, what they had planned the next day, as well as everyone made me feel like shit for being a nurse. I think that's probably when I would have left. I would be questioning the relationship at that point, for sure.
You would have found a polite reason to be like, oh, I got to go back to Chicago. I just remembered.
Knowing me, I wouldn't have been polite about it. For sure.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Get me out of here.
Yeah.
I need some space.
Yeah.
As you would have every right to do for how rude they are.
But for me, that's not the point to leave, because I feel like, knowing me, I would quietly fume about these like little insults and slights and be like, what is she doing? Why is she doing it? Like, and I would sit through all of that. And I think the point that it would become too much when he lights the yard on fire, when that just goes down and it's like a Rube Goldberg of just like, oh, I think I would. And then when I watch it, I say, oh, the universe hates Greg Focker. And if that was me, I'd be like, everyone here, that what that would translate to is everyone around me hates me now. And I just can't sit through another, like, even hour of everyone staring daggers at me. I've ruined this wedding. I don't want to ruin this wedding by just being here and everyone talking about the fact that there's the guy.
Yeah.
That's the guy that did it. So it's just kind of like, I'm sorry, I'm going to go, you know? But having said that, now I'm not sure I ever would have gotten in that situation because I'm not Greg Focker. And I would say the situation I most likely would have gotten into, I totally would have been the dude who spiked the volleyball. And
that's what I was going to say. That is when I would have left. I would have left. And obviously it's an accident, and I feel like I would have been able to leave knowing, like, okay, my girlfriend's probably not going to break up with me for this. It was a horrible accident, but I am not going to stay for this woman's wedding because she doesn't want you there. Like, I feel like that part is breezed over so quickly, but no chance after you busted up the bride's face would the bride, you know. But yeah, I like that we picked 3 different points. That was exactly what I wanted out of that question. So good.
Sorry, I stomped on yours a little, Paul.
Oh no, not at all. I was glad it was a good transition because I was ready to say I would have picked earlier than yours, but later than Katie's.
Yeah.
I
get angry quickly. So yeah.
I will say that this time around, I liked it. I was worried I would like it less than I did. I think I like it less than I used to now.
Yeah.
But it's still pretty tight, in my opinion.
Yeah.
This time I was just able to find a few things that are insane.
Yes.
Like, that are just absolutely ridiculous. And it's a comedy, so you can forgive those, of course, but it's, things that I didn't see as plot holes before I now see as, like...
Well, like, I would say one thing about it that really bothered me this time around, and I didn't even remember this, to be honest, from initially watching it, but I really hate how much, and not only the first one, but they also kind of still do it in the second one, is how much they harp on him being a nurse. Like, it's so bizarre, and and I think that's why it reminds me of Wedding Crashers in a way, because I feel like it was like this time where comedy, it was like very uncool to be a kind person. Like, it's like there was like this area of comedy in the early 2000s where it was like, no, if you're kind, you're like the butt of every joke. And it was just bizarre to like see it again.
I would definitely say with that, just like with the name Focker, they hit it one to too many times in the first one. In the first one alone, they just hit them so many times.
Yeah.
And I would say when they do the Martha Focker was enough of a stretch that it was like, okay.
I know.
But then when he's Gaylord Focker, it's like, okay, I
still don't find that funny, and I don't think I ever did.
The Martha Focker, Pamela Martha Focker, I remember not getting that the first time, or maybe even the second time, just being like, I don't get it. And then when it was explained to me, being like, oh, meh. But they really thought they had something there, and I don't think that they did.
I mean, the second one, the cousin Orny Focker is like...
Randy and Orny.
Is Orny a name? Like,
Orny is a name. There's a comedian named Orny Adams.
Okay.
Oh. Wait, did you look that up because of this?
No, I just happened to know. Yeah, I just knew that.
What I noticed I feel like more than anything this time around with the first one, was how big Pam's sins are in this situation, because she knows her dad is that crazy. You know what I mean? And I don't think she really does a good job preparing him at all.
Yeah. Oh, come on. When he's lugging that giant pot with the bulb in it to give to her dad as a florist, she didn't be like, oh, he's over that, or like make up some lie that like, she just lets him walk into it with this 40-pound pot of dirt and looking like a jackass.
Yeah, and okay, her biggest sins I wrote down for me. One, they get to the house, she throws his cigarettes on the roof, says, "Oh, I told you." At least that one she told him. My dad hates smokers or whatever. But then she says, "Oh, by the way, we're not living together." And then he says, "Oh, I thought you said you told them." And she gets interrupted by the parents coming out. That's huge. I mean, Greg, I don't think realizes how huge that is, but that's a huge. The drive over, the plane ride over, she couldn't have said any of that. That's crazy. Two, after he wakes up late and the whole family makes fun of him, she says, "Go wake up my brother."
Yes.
And borrow some of his clothes.
Yeah.
We
were like audibly like, what?
Yeah. He's never met your brother, and you're going to send him to take clothes from this guy. Like,
it's nuts. And there's no reason for her not to go do it. She's not doing anything. And then number three, pretty much everything with Kevin, where she didn't tell him he was the brother's or the brother-in-law's best man.
Yeah.
Or that, like, and the Iceman and Maverick stuff. It's just, she's very, like, her behavior with her ex-boyfriend is nuts.
It's enough to make me, like, if I was him, be like, I don't know if I want to marry this woman. Yeah. Like, now that you're listing all these things, I think by the end of the movie, I would have been like, you know what? I can maybe do better and not be terrified of my father-in-law.
She doesn't give him any support. She gives him no, like, ease or support. It's just like she lets him walk into things and, like, forgets he's there until he messes up.
Well, at the very least, I feel like the first one does a good job at giving her charm. Like, sort of forgetting all the insanity. Like, you believe in their chemistry and that they love each other and that she's, like, reasonable enough. It plays well enough. Whereas in 2, it's like, it's just figuring out how to write her out of every scene. And make sure that he's in the room with either just Jack or the wacky parents. Like, they're not central anymore to the, or at least their chemistry.
In Meet the Fockers,
In Meet the Fockers, But I guess I don't want to jump ahead too much. I've got some fun facts and notes here on the first one.
I'm just curious, before you start with actual facts, this is the first I remember seeing Owen Wilson.
I will say I remembered him probably at the time best from The Cable Guy. because he's the guy that Jim Carrey beats up in the bathroom.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty small part.
Thing.
It's just like, yeah, as like a Jim Carrey obsessed fan, I was like, you know, I had seen that enough times that I was like, oh yeah.
Oh yeah, he does call the waiter over, and he's like, "Hey, Padre, I said no ice or something like that." And he's like,
"What's going on with our chicken, man? Have the eggs had a chance to hatch yet?" Yeah, yeah, he's the jerk. For me, he is one of the funniest things in Meet the Parents. I mean, his pompousness, it works for his type very, very well. I think the part.
It does. It's like his pompousness too. It comes off as like, sometimes in movies, I think that type of pompousness can come off as overly written to a degree where it's hard to believe that the character themselves would actually be that way. Yeah. But for him, it works really well. Like, I feel like I often feel like he means well, even though he comes off really bad. Like, it's like riding this really fine line of feeling genuine in some strange way. Like,
he sells it. I mean, his character is like essentially, hey, be a dick without being a dick. And he nails it.
Yeah. And be threatening to the new boyfriend's masculinity in every possible way. Yeah. But without him being aggressive about it. It really does. Yeah, it works really well. And he's one of those people that is being sincere, but he's still an ass. Like when he's saying it's an altar, or you might call it a chuppah. Like,
that's true. Before we move on to your fun fact, my only other big thing that I thought was like something that I didn't like was that Robert De Niro didn't know his son smokes pot, because it's like, dude, you know everything. Like, how do you not know that your son's a huge pothead? And I feel like they never showed that he figured that out in the first movie.
It does seem like, based on the fact that Dina says he never liked Kevin until Pam and her broke up, that he just kind of shuts himself off to he like blinds himself to the facts if it has to do with his family, maybe, or
that's what I that actual line made so much sense to me, and I was like, yes, this is like that's the closest thing you get to like a character moment for Jack is that is that line where it's like, you never even liked Kevin until they broke up, and I'm like, oh, so he just does this with like all the guys, and that's what makes Meet the Fockers so disappointing is that even though he had that moment, he's like back to like the plot of Meet the Fockers is he's trying to impress Jack so Jack will still let him marry his daughter. It's like a complete rehash of the exact same goal.
Yep.
Well, and I think, and we'll get deeper into it, but I think that a major part of the problem with something like this is like, if the first one pushes it far enough, basically Jack is crazy. You can balance it like, oh, he just gets overexcited because he loves Pam and he is expert and Greg does lie and blah 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 blah. But he's crazy enough by the end of the first one. And then there's sort of some peace in the scenario, the situation, and you think that there's a breakthrough. I feel like evolving the character is necessary at that point. Mm-hmm. But if you want the jokes in the second one to be the same as the jokes in the first one, I guess you can't. Yeah. And therefore, the character becomes bananas insane.
Yeah. I feel like it would be insane for us to go through this podcast and not talk about how great Mr. Jinx is. Like, the cat's great. And I do feel like the cat makes the movie. Like, it's just worth seeing Robert De Niro love this cat so much and like be so obsessed with training it. One line that really got me this time that I don't remember getting me as a kid is when he says to his other daughter, "How can you say that? That cat's been like a brother to you." Like, it's just the sincerity with which he delivers that line is really excellent. It is. Yeah, it is really great. Yeah.
The last thing I'll say about the first one is that what I really appreciate about it in comparison to the second one is that you do, even though it's this, outrageous comedy with big laughs, there are some quiet moments where what you get to enjoy is a quiet joke, a quiet moment of discomfort, or a funny line that someone says in the context of a kind of normal situation. Like, there are occasions when it's believable, whereas the second one, it seems like all they're trying to do in every scene is, how do we do something outrageous here and here and here and here? I don't know. Every, and some scenes are sort of, they're not quietly uncomfortable. They're like loudly uncomfortable, but then they just end with Greg falling out of a chair because it's like, well, we need our laugh.
The first one really, like, it didn't require a big slapsticky pratfall in every scene because it had like a plot and like a goal like that was clearly defined, and it was like Greg needs to get approval from this guy, and this problem leads into the next problem because we have a wedding to put on and there's an agenda and the sequel just doesn't have that stuff, so it's like well, he falls down. That's what I liked about the first one, is that like the script is like, it's tight. It's like scenes all lead into each other. They don't like chew up things for comedy purposes. Like it moves along and it's entertaining, and it's things are happening.
He's rewriting his review from high school as we speak. He really likes it.
I could certainly see giving it credit without liking it. I mean, it's a very particular type of movie, although I know that you also love other cringe humor.
I was trying to wrap my head around that, but I think it's like I think the difference between him and like Larry David or something is like Larry David, I'm like, I don't care if this guy loses. He's kind of like a curmudgeon. Whereas Greg, I'm like, no, like he loves this woman, and she's giving him this sort of idea that you have to impress my dad or the world is really, and he's just trying to do that, and then no matter what he does, he can't. And it's like, so I buy his stakes and I like him, and you put those two things together, and I'm like, oh, now he's going to get tortured for an hour and 45 minutes. Like,
well, and that's a specific enough idea, like it or not, that's like the dad from hell. It's the ultimate challenge for me, meeting the parents. But 2 is just, there almost is no idea.
In the second one, we were trying to figure out why they were even there for a portion of the movie. We were like, wait,
because the wedding's in the fall. Yeah.
We did not know.
They drove all the way to Florida to plan a wedding with both in-laws. Who does?
I don't think that's exactly what happened. I don't even know.
I think the implication is that Jack has insisted that they meet before he agrees to the wedding, which they never quite say, which makes it a little confusing.
Right, because if they say that, people would be like, oh, it's the exact same stakes as the first one. Like,
and it's crazy.
And why would Pam allow that? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. At this point, they already went through that. So it's like they can't say it, but that is, I think, what's going on.
And it's also entirely out of Greg's control. Like it's like you've crutched this on something that is up to the universe and like not in the main. It's actually really terrible. I think like from a structural level for a story, because no one in the actual plot then has any bearing over where the story goes to a degree. Like Greg has no agency over where this is going to go for him. So it's really frustrating.
Like if his father-in-law doesn't like his parents, what can he do?
Yeah.
Other than manipulate and try and lie and like do all the things his future father-in-law doesn't want him to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in the second one, he doesn't lie ever. Yeah. Like, he has learned and Jack hasn't. And I guess, okay. All right. Well, let's take a break for a second talking about the second one, because we're definitely going to get into this. But just some really, I didn't think I would find such interesting stuff about this movie, but there is some really interesting stuff. It's a remake, and it's based on a 1992 independent comedy written and directed by and starring Greg Gillina and Mary Ruth Clark. It had a $100,000 budget. It was 75 minutes long. And it received a lot of critical acclaim, but it couldn't find a distributor. So Universal Pictures bought the rights to it in 1996. At that point, Jim Hertzfeld wrote the script for it as soon as they got the rights. I don't know. I mean, the only other movie besides this franchise that this man has written the screenplay for was Meet the Deedles, the Paul Walker. I think it's a Disney movie. But it's the one with the poster where their hair looks like ocean waves.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
wait, does he only write movies called Meet the? Was in the title?
Yeah. I wonder.
I like to
if he
think that
had-
was a studio executive strategy.
Yeah.
It was like, what are other movies about meeting?
Yeah.
Let's get
Well,
that
funnily
one.
enough, co-wrote Meet the Fockers, but did not co-write Little Fockers. So maybe it was there's no Meet the. How do we? We don't meet anybody in this movie.
You don't meet your baby. Oh man, that's amazing.
So the first director to be attached was Steven Soderbergh, which is almost not worth mentioning at this point, because I've found in so many of these episodes that Steven Soderbergh was always attached to everything. Like,
Wow.
at some point, he's attached to so many things. I guess he's just, I don't know.
I mean, he's very eclectic as a filmmaker. I'm always kind of shocked when I look at his filmography. I'm like, wow, he's really done it all.
And he is a student he is a student of film. Like, he watches a lot of stuff and like knows a lot. And I could see him being a fan of a 75-minute never released indie movie, and be like, oh, I'll do the Hollywood
that's
remake
true.
of that. And then when they were like, so we want him to talk about milking a cat, and then Steven Soderbergh's like, oh, okay, never mind.
Yeah. After that, for a long time, Steven Spielberg was set to direct. And
What?
when that was the case, this movie was written for Jim Carrey. And he was attached apparently for a long time. And in this iteration, Al Pacino was attached to be Jack.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. And
They're
the
like
comedy
a
was
similar
not
level of like overacting, like giant bigness, and then they went for like more subtle.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
that's true. Yeah, that would have been nuts.
Would have been way too.
Yeah. I'll be watching you.
Smoke weed.
Yeah. So basically, Jay Roach was always interested, and then once Spielberg wasn't involved in the project anymore, he got signed on, because at that point he was a name of sorts for comedy. Yeah. Then John Hamburg, who is a longtime collaborator with Ben Stiller, he's worked on Zoolander, Along Came Polly. He was brought on by Ben Stiller to help adapt the screenplay for more of his sensibilities than Jim Carrey's.
Gotcha.
And then in terms of making like this movie what it was, because I feel like with this premise, it could have been a lot worse, certainly. But a lot of people brought in a lot of the most famous stuff that weren't the two writers. Jim Carrey came up with the idea of him being named Focker. Novelist Jerry Stahl, who Ben Stiller would later go on to play in Permanent Midnight, he did a pass on the script, and he added the cat milking scene.
Oh, whoa.
Oh, okay.
Alexander Payne and Jim Taylor did an uncredited rewrite, and their additions included Jack's poem to his mother, which is pretty great. And
not a single rhyme in the whole thing.
And one of still holds up. I like the so much love yet also so much information is a great reaction line.
That is a great reaction.
But they added the climactic airport sequence. Robert De Niro brought in the idea of the polygraph test scene because he started researching his character. And in the original, he was a CIA guy and all that stuff was still the same. And Ben Stiller came up with the idea of Greg being a male nurse. So a lot of the huge set pieces, it seems like, were just sort of brought from everywhere. And without any of those things, who knows,
What about Jinxie?
Yeah.
Jinxie, where did he?
Toilet flushing.
Yeah, the toilet flushing cat, the star of the show.
It doesn't say, I don't believe he was in the 1992 original. I don't believe that there was a Mr. Jinx. I know that the breaking of the urn is in the original and Jack being in the CIA, but apparently it's a much different sounding movie. It ends with Pam's sister killing herself and leaving a note that says, Greg made me do this. Because, like throughout the movie, she wants to like practice her monologue and nobody wants to hear it. And then Greg hears it and insults her and then she kills herself. And then I think the movie ends with him like escaping and running from the family.
Oh, so it's a
Like-
much more absurd. It sounds like it's
Yes.
very absurd.
Wow. That sounds really crazy.
Yeah.
I kind of want to
and
see
not-
it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a lot of crazy production notes. And then as far as performance notes, so Jay Roach wanted for the whole movie to feel like an anxiety dream for Greg.
Yeah.
So he kept him in clothes that the actor hated for how uncomfortable they were, to sort of keep him uncomfortable at all times. He was purposefully aloof about how De Niro felt about Ben Stiller's performance and sort of led him to believe he wasn't a fan. And then De Niro, being method, kept his distance from Stiller between takes because he didn't want to ruin any of that energy in the scenes.
Wow. Well, the anxiety worked well for Steve. Yeah.
It's like, wow, what a weird thing to try and make your
Yeah.
millions and millions of audience members feel.
Jay Roach is clearly a really good director. I mean, I feel like he has all his movies are always really well done.
I
So,
will say I felt a similar level of anxiety during Bombshell.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say he's one of these directors like Todd Phillips, who's gone from late 90s, early 2000s raunchy comedy to serious work.
Yes.
Award-worthy.
Very, very true.
Yeah. And then some extra fun facts. I think that you're going to like this. De Niro loved the cat siblings who played Mr. Jinx.
Oh.
Their names were Mishka and Bailey. And he would play with them between scenes and insisted that they be in more scenes than originally scripted because he loved cats so much.
There's where the cat came from.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And apparently the production team begged Jay Roach not to pick a Himalayan cat because they're so hard to train, but he liked the look. So they went with it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a pretty iconic looking cat. Like, I feel like you always remember what that cat looks like, for sure.
Yeah. And then other actors considered for the roles. For Pam, Naomi Watts was attached, but they decided she was not sexy enough for the part.
Wow.
Which
that was like right around Mulholland Drive time. So she was pretty
Yeah.
early in her career, I would think. Well, not early. I think she had done some stuff before that, but that was like when her career was like breaking in a huge way, probably.
But I remember Mulholland Drive having sexy stuff in it, specifically with her
Very true,
character.
yeah.
Yeah. So pretty crazy. And also, like, that character, it's not that important, I don't think, the sexiness
I agree.
of Pam.
I'm surprised. That would have been, like, honestly, like, the idea of Naomi Watts having been to Meet the Parents, because I feel like, I hate to say this, I think that actress is probably, I don't really know her very well. Terry Polo, I think is her name. Yeah. But she's like the least, like, I mean, I know Blythe Danner, Robert De Niro, Ben Stiller, like, they're all like household names. So if they had like rounded that out with Naomi Watts, it would have been a pretty insane cast. But I don't want to speak. Terry Polo does a great job, though. It's not like, it worked out fine.
I mean, in terms of how these movies just get worse and worse and worse, the cast just gets more and more stacked. You add Dustin Hoffman and Barbara Streisand. In Little Fockers, Harvey Keitel's in it. Laura Dern is in it.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it's like they really...
Jay Roach. Did Jay Roach do Little Fockers also?
He did not.
Oh, that's right. You said that.
Did not get him back for Little Fockers. And it was also only John Hamburg who wrote that one. The original writer didn't write any of it. And I can't, I mean, okay, well, let's talk about Meet the Fockers, and then maybe I can tease you with some of what was the absolute worst about Little Fockers. Okay, so just comparably, Meet the Parents, 84% on Rotten Tomatoes. I think that's pretty fair. It's not for everyone. Had a $55 million budget, and it grossed $330.4 million.
Was that worldwide?
In 2000.
Wow.
I believe so.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Meet the Fockers did very well financially. It had a $522.7 million gross and is De Niro's highest grossing movie ever. That I understand it making money, I guess, because the first one was enough of a draw to get people to the second one. But this blows my mind. On Bravo's 100 Funniest Movies Ever, Meet the Parents is number 52. Meet the Fockers is number 25 of the funniest movies ever. Yeah. Unbelievable. I didn't look at what the rest of the list is, but that's I just don't understand it from any angle.
Do they count up? Is it one of the few?
100 is the best.
Yeah. Maybe that's true. That would make
for number 100.
Even still, for it to make the top 100 is ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so yeah, just getting into, I mean, anything that we haven't said about what sucks about Meet the Fockers.
Yeah.
I think a problem, sort of like based on what you were saying earlier about the first one, is you have no anchor in this movie. Mm-hmm. And even the people who are supposed to be normal, for them to be in this situation makes them insane. You know what I mean? Yeah. It can't make any sense for anybody. And for his parents to be like that, I mean, not even just polar opposite of Jack, but so freewheeling and embarrassing and, you know, all about sex and bathroom humor. And for that to be the case, his reaction in the first one and at the beginning of this one don't make any sense. For him to know who they are, he should just not even want it to happen.
Well, he says he delayed it like 2 years because he never wanted them think of that though, for people that were only together 10 months and got engaged, they've delayed their wedding in this whole universe for 2 years because he didn't want them to meet, which makes sense.
Well, they don't bring that up at the beginning either, which is crazy.
No, they don't.
They should have brought that up earlier. There are no stakes. Like, they're not going there. Nobody talks about why they're going there. Nobody talks about why Greg needs his parents to be impressed or to impress Jack. You know, because if they talked about that, they'd look insane.
I almost wonder if maybe it makes me question if at a certain point in the timeline of this movie getting made and then going through the audience testing phase before it was released, if that was at the front of the movie, but it was such an insane thing that people were like, yeah, but that's not a normal thing. You don't have to have the parents buy off on the other parents.
Even if that's the idea, is we need to meet his parents to sign off on them, the way they do it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
It could have been done, this same premise, because I was going to say, they have the teaser line in the first one, we have to meet his parents. That's your plot, and that sounds right, you know?
Yeah.
Really
but it should be before the wedding weekend. You know, this one was a wedding weekend. Why not do it again? And then in this one, it's a big deal when the wedding's even going to be. Will it be 6 months from this 2-year gap? Will it be next month? No, at the end, for no reason, it's this weekend.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
So why wasn't it that weekend the entire time?
Right. Well, and specifically for them to say, we need to get married this weekend, I don't even understand why they would want to do that. Planning a wedding and pulling off a wedding is a big headache for anyone. And everyone knows that she's pregnant at that point, so there's no reason to rush it.
Well, and there's so many things too, so there's not only is there her pregnancy, which is a further complication to the whole thing because they don't want that lied, that's clearly something that maybe Greg's lied about it and we don't want that to get revealed.
Right.
But then in addition to that, they have the whole, it's kind of a hat on a hat to them be oh, and he also has this other son that he doesn't even know about. And that's what he's been lying about the whole time. And then in addition, there's also the baby, which I have to say, my biggest note on this is cut the baby and everything with it. And the movie actually maybe wouldn't have been fine, because I feel a lot of the really lowbrow humor also comes out of everything with the baby.
The laziest.
Now this is a running trend, I feel in a lot of movies where, and in sequels in particular, where they bring in a kid and the kid is to blame for ruining it. You know what I mean? And I remember Meet the Fockers being not good, but better than this.
Yeah,
better than this viewing. But I do remember back when really disliking the baby from the first moment I knew there was a baby in it, and putting a lot of the blame on the baby. This time around, I don't think the baby is at fault for as much of it as I remember.
Well,
because I think
the performance's fault.
No. Right. It's not
the baby's actually a really incredible performer.
Yes.
I must say.
Yeah.
Sign language.
Yeah.
And talking. The baby's pretty good.
Yeah, they're all. It's more a problem with the lowbrow jokes, but the lowbrow jokes are coming from everyone constantly. I don't know that the baby's jokes are any worse. And I would say one of the funniest scenes conceptually, I don't know that it worked fully, was his hands glued to the rum bottle watching Scarface.
Yeah.
Like that on
that's why they
sounds fun.
That's why they had the baby in the movie. I think the difference is the Greg's parents have just as lowbrow humor with all their sex talk.
Yes.
But that's the plot of the movie. So it's like you gotta have them in it. So if that's their thing, that's their thing. The baby has nothing to do with the plot of the movie. So that baby is just like they jump through hoops to get that baby into the movie, and then all you get is lowbrow humor from it. Like, they just wanted to do fake boob jokes.
We were saying it felt like the screenwriter had a baby at the time and was like, I gotta write all this in the script. This has to be written somewhere.
The last fun fact I have for this one is that the MPAA wouldn't allow the title Meet the Fockers unless it could be proven that someone actually had that last name. So they had to find someone with the last name Focker just to prove that it is a viable last name, because otherwise they would have been forced to change the spelling in the title to Fokkers, which they really didn't make any sense.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I love that bit of trivia, and I'm glad the movie exists just to have been like,
Now I'm imagining scenarios. I'm imagining all these scenarios of like DreamWorks and a big studio guy going to a guy with a briefcase and being like, all right, here's your money. Legally change your name to Focker.
Yeah.
So that we can dupe the MPAA.
So moving along toward the pitches, I always have these questions I ask before we get into them. Sure. Oh, and also, to preface, Katie has elected to be our judge today, which makes you the first guest judge on the show.
oh.
We have not had any, so that's pretty exciting. If had you wanted to pitch, I was going to try to come up with some way for your cats to decide to be on theme.
Yeah.
But,
I think they would have decided naps.
Yeah.
They would have
this is much
whichever pitch had more of Jinx in it.
Yeah.
I will say horrible use of Jinx in 2.
In the second one,
Yep.
The second they showed that baby, I was like, oh, they're just going to change Jinx up for a baby and like barely have Jinx in this movie and tons of baby. And that's exactly what they did.
So then my first question is, should Meet the Parents have a sequel in the first place?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think it can.
If movies can have sequels, I don't see any reason why this movie shouldn't have a sequel, because there are more parents.
I'm coming in with the answer no. I don't think, only because I don't want any more from this story. Okay. When you reach the end of the story, I don't know how you could be any happier in terms of what comes next. Yeah. I certainly think they could have done a better job.
But in your defense, yes. And I think I'm also saying this, though, with the hindsight of knowing where it went next with Meet the Fockers, because I did know what the concept of Meet the Fockers was. And honestly, like, the idea of Dustin Hoffman and Barbara Streisand as the parents, everything on paper is a great pitch.
Yeah, exactly. It was like, I was like, should I come up with fake casting for my fake sequel? And I was like, honestly, I can't think of better. Like, I was like, definitely in a box, but I was like, I can't think anybody better than those two, like to play Ben Stiller's parents in this movie. And then that informed my pitch to some extent, which I, regret, but like, it was hard to
separate that.
Yeah, it really was.
Well, for as much bad as there is to say about Meet the Fockers, I don't have anything bad to say about really anyone's performance. I do think everybody is giving 100% to what is ultimately a very weak script.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't think that. I agree. I love the casting. I like the premise, and I like the title a lot. Like that. Yeah. When it was coming up, it's like, oh, that's great. That's a funny, exciting title and a play on what they've already done.
The only credit I do want to give the movie before you guys move into your pitches is I did like that at the end, everyone turned on Jack, essentially, because I felt like they did get that right, which I was glad about.
I'm curious, do you have any other questions that you like? Because I know you asked the question about whether or not
I have one more question.
sequel.
I have one more question.
I'm curious.
This one, And this one has a tendency to work better for some movies than others. I don't think it's going to be a big hit here, but sequel or prequel, what is the sweet spot in terms of following this up? I don't know that there's a prequel to be had here.
No.
Yeah.
Not unless it's explaining why she's doing mindful meditation for a bunch of 3 to 4-year-olds. Yeah.
It's a Pam prequel.
A Pam prequel.
I mean, if you couldn't get Ben Stiller back for some reason, you could do it with Owen Wilson.
So a Meet the Parents, but with Kevin. And it took me aback this viewing through that they've only been together 10 months. Yeah. Whereas it sounded like she and Kevin were together for just years and years. Yeah. So the circumstances would have been a little bit different. But yeah, I guess I could see that.
I still think that's a terrible idea, only because no one wants to see that movie where we know the ending is she doesn't end up with him inevitably.
Well, that's what I think would be that he still loves her. And that's what I think would be so interesting to see what that movie would be like. Because it's like, we know they're going to fall apart. It's not going to work. And this guy still pines for her years later.
Well, sort of like what you're saying, and I don't want to step on any of your pitch, but I will say that for my pitch, I ended up I ended up deciding to take a big left turn because when I started thinking of like, okay, well, what's set up in the first one to be the ideal sequel? It's his parents meeting her parents.
Yeah.
Meet the Fockers is pretty much your title. And what I want from the arc, Greg and Jack are now sort of have like a shaky bond that Greg doesn't want to mess with.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, I just like, these are only just vague plot points, but like, all I could think of was like the idea that Greg would come in, taking Jack's side all the time, and then sort of like hurt his own parents' feelings, by doing that. And then in the end, Greg being sort of like the heart or whatever of the film, realizes what he's doing, stands up to Jack, and then like in Meet the Parents when everybody sort of like ousts Greg and he's on the outside, same thing happens to Jack. The reason that I didn't try to follow any of that was I was sort of like, oh, I think that some of this happens in Meet the Fockers.
Yeah.
Like
it did.
And it does.
Yeah.
But very little. Exactly. It's sort of like, I mean, I am happy I ended up taking my left turn, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, that was there, but it was so not the focus and it was so not well executed.
Yeah, I agree.
It would have been great. Well, what you described is like, that would have been a fun movie. It's like him still wanting to impress Jack at the cost of all his other relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Fockers themselves would have to have been taken down a notch. At least,
I mean, they would have had to have been the parents they reference in Meet the Parents, which is like a normal family with siblings and like fighting over Chinese food and like
right.
Yeah, and he has no siblings.
And certainly liberal, not conservative, but they don't need to be sex monkeys.
Absolutely.
Okay, so do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
I'll go first because it sounds like you take a big divergence, and that seems like the logical second one. I don't want to follow that because mine is like relatively conservative.
You want to hear a story?
So I wanted the stakes to be big. So I wanted it to be, I mean, and again, we talked about this already, but I wanted it to be, they saved Greg put off having the two parents meet until the week of the wedding, which to me, and I put in parentheses in my notes, seems obvious because it does seem obvious. It's like this is obviously what the movie, if they're going to meet each other. So my twist on what we see in the actual thing was Greg's parents don't like him. He's always been a disappointment. He's one of many children, and all his siblings do everything better than he does.
Oh.
So he's just as desperate to impress them as he is, as he was Jack in the first one. But it's slightly different because now he's got like handsomer, like more fit, more successful siblings to like compete with.
Yeah.
So he's desperate to impress them more than he was Jack. So we upped the ante a little bit. He could never compare to his 5 perfect siblings. So in that desperation, somehow he accidentally, in trying to impress his parents, he lies, and he says that Pam is half Jewish. And they're like, oh, so his parents are like, oh, so she's practices in the faith. And he's like, oh no, it's Jewish on her father's side. So then he has to. So he's like, she's not very religious. Don't make a big deal out of it. And Pam's like, what did you tell him that for? And he's like, it's gonna be fine. She's like, but Greg, they're gonna meet my dad. So then Greg has to go to Jack, who again, they have like a tentatively good relationship, and they're both the first time you see them together, it's Jack being like, hey Greg, hey Focker, how you doing? Like, we're buddies now. And he has to say, I have a note here where it says Jack arrives wearing Jinx and a baby Bjorn.
I love
That's
it.
excellent. Yeah. I like that Greg is now pulling a Pam on Greg by not properly preparing her and just sort of like last minute being like, oh yeah, this is what we're gonna do. Yeah,
it is the flip side. It switches a lot of roles, to be honest. Because then, so Greg has to talk to Jack. So Jack's like, fine, I'll pretend to be Jewish. So that's essentially the first lie that then spirals into just a hijinks. So the movie then becomes Greg trying to pass the lie off and having to lie more and more things go wrong. And you get some fun scenes where Jack is terrible at being Jewish, and he's a small niche sect of Sicilian Jews, and sort of Greg just has to sit there and watch Jack lie, and you get the flip side of that. But in other ways, Jack is actually kind of good at certain things, like because he was in the CIA, and like he sort of surprises everyone when he reveals that he speaks fluent Hebrew, and because he had to work in the Middle East or whatever, and like deal with that stuff. So, so Jack is better at being Jewish than Greg, and Greg even starts to get jealous of Jack. And Jack can't help but rub it in Greg's face so much that Greg tries to like sabotage him in one scene against his better interests. He's like, "Oh, really, Jack? Tell us more about your Sicilian bar mitzvah." And then again, I really wanted to like turn it on its head and make Jack do the scramble that Greg has to do in the first one. But, and Greg's parents love Pam. Greg isn't sure if it's because of the lie or what, but finally Greg did something right. Every compliment to Pam is a backhanded insult to Greg.
Nice.
Also, yes, we see Jack do some spy shit. In one scene written specifically for Katie, Jack and Jinx work together to break in and steal security camera footage of Jack eating a ton of bacon. Oh yeah, that's a running thing. Jack is constantly trying to sneak off and eat bacon, even though he's supposed to be kosher. Also, his wife is like, Jack, your heart,
your cholesterol,
And Jack keeps smelling the bacon, but he says Jinx, his cat, is Gentile.
Nice.
It's just like
it's way more. I would rather deal with this hacky shit than what was in Meet the Fockers. Personally,
it's like a severe level of hacky, but it's not as slapsticky or gross.
Something tells me that this would be more frowned upon. I don't know.
2004 would have been fine.
Yeah, it's true.
I stand by 2004.
Yeah.
I like the level with which he's still humanizing Jinx, letting him have his own religious choice. I really like that. I also like that for it being, number 2 on top of number 1, it's anxiety inducing for Greg and Jack. Yeah. Like they're both stuck. Yeah.
It's a buddy comedy in some ways. Like they're kind of like giving each other shit, but then they also depend on each other. More so Greg depends on Jack, but Jack is like trying to step up and be a friend to Right.
I was thinking about it too, though, that Jack, like, if being a CIA agent was his thing and he had to, like, personify being people he wasn't for a long time, there's no way he doesn't want to be able to pull this off. Like, it would be like it would be like a stain on
Pride
Jack.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. He's like retired, but he feels like he could still do it if he had to, like.
Yeah. So then to wrap it up, Greg and Jack have a big fight at the end about something. But this is what I thought was crucial. Jack sort of makes up for something where he tells Greg's parents off, stands up to them, and stands up for Greg. Because again, Greg's parents in this version,
don't like him.
He's like a black sheep, and they like all the stuff better. I didn't see it at first, but Greg is the best guy in the world. Jack even says he was wrong to think parents could. Oh, this is important to me, that Jack says he was wrong to ever think that parents could give permission for marrying their child. These two people love each other and they're their own people, and that's the only thing that's important. And nothing of what I think or you or even me thinks matters when it comes to love. Because that's what I think the first one was missing, was Jack like owning up to like this outdated form of like asking the parents, is like, we do it because it's a tradition, but like if the parents say no, you're not going to be like, well, I guess we have to stop loving each other.
That's true.
Because like the parents kind of have to say yes, and if they say no, they're a monster. So like I wanted Jack to sort of like make that full arc he doesn't, or that whole thing, which is fair. In the first one, he doesn't, but if you push him, if there's a sequel, make him do it. So we get that big payoff we don't see in the first one. And then, I don't know, Jinx still flushes the dog down the toilet, because that was pretty funny. It's not in my notes, but put it in.
That was terrible. The dog down the... It was so like, Sorry, what were you going to say, Paul?
I found it annoying that the main thing they gave Jinx in this movie was that he flushes now.
I think as an evolution for Jinx, it does make some sense that he learns to flush.
I'm willing to bet that, because the reason Jinx doesn't flush in the first one is because he doesn't have opposable thumbs. And I'm willing to bet they got a million letters of people being like, you don't need thumbs to flush a toilet.
Definitely.
Fit. I liked it.
Do you have a title?
Little Focker? No.
When I was sort of following that more traditional thread of just the parents meeting, the best I could come up with as an alt title was The Parents Meet. Just mix up the words.
Yeah.
But not great. Meet the Fockers is better, for sure.
Yeah.
When we watched this one, there was a moment in it, Steve just looked at me and he was like, totally fucked. And I was like, that's a great title.
So, going into my pitch, what I sort of stemmed from was, rather than trying to change the universe, I sort of looked at it from the element of it being like an anxiety nightmare, and thought about what could up the ante. I guess it's not necessarily a different genre, but I took it into a different subgenre, and I think you'll see what I mean. Okay.
Is there something you want to tell me?
Greg and Pam get married. The opening credits feature footage from the wedding, which I thought also seemed obvious, because the first one features footage of Pam, and it even goes as far as to have that Randy Newman song, and it's a new Randy Newman song in this one. That's a pretty ideal start. You see the wedding. Maybe you even see the Burns meeting the Fockers at the wedding. Some, vague discomfort, but it's like all found footage, so it's like not going over the top with the jokes. So then there's a sequence sort of watching the rest of Greg and Pam's lives. I don't want it to be like overly long, but essentially it's like maybe starts with him carrying her over the threshold of their new house after their wedding. And then you watch a sequence of their lives in this house all the way until they grow old together. Pam dies just a few days before Greg as an old woman.
Okay.
So Greg says goodbye to his kids, dies a few days later. After dying, Greg enters heaven, expecting to be reunited with Pam, but what he finds is an afterlife very different from anything he would have expected. I mean, he's in heaven, and God, played by Robert De Niro, is more or less the familiar Christian archetype, but with like a blatant, though technically polite, holier than thou air about him, very much like Jack, who he mentions as one of his personal favorite creations, Jack Burns. And he doesn't seem to care. No, he's God, but he
likes Jack.
Formed Jack after himself, after his own image. And he doesn't think much of Greg. He kind of scoffs at his Jewishness, delicately. I think that this whole thing might be a little too offensive religiously, but anyways, I went for it.
Did you hear?
Yeah, both of you guys went down very religiously offensive routes, which I find interesting.
Yeah. Greg is informed that upon entering heaven, women, the far more sacred human type, are given the choice to move on to their next stage of evolution as goddesses, whom, as a collective, work on solving the problems of the universe from heaven. In the process of becoming such, they forget their earthbound lives. So Pam has already done this, and Pam is another one of God's personal favorites, and she's already made this choice, so she doesn't remember the life that she and Greg shared. It's also explained that goddesses who are interested in having an eternal companion glow from the inside out. This was just whatever. And Pam is not glowing. She looks normal. So Greg's disappointed to hear this, something God doesn't really take seriously, because here the libido is neutralized and all other happinesses are available at all times. The only example I can have for Greg is like he's smoking the best cigarettes ever. I have more heaven ideas to get into later, but in terms of just sticking to the plot, when after meeting at a heavenly function, Pam begins to glow after meeting Greg, he becomes hopeful that he can win her back. But God has other plans. He never intended for Pam to end up with Greg and always saw her with Kevin, who was also in heaven, and also still after Pam. And he saw Pam and Kevin as like the ideal match, sort of created them for each other. So then, that's sort of the main action of the story is Greg trying to win Pam. God is maybe, in a kindly God way, sabotaging him or trying to sort of like push her towards Kevin. But it's only when... side note, I also want Jesus to also be played by Owen Wilson. So the idea being that God formed Kevin after his son. Yeah. And I also thought it could be fun for there to be an awkward scene between Jesus and Greg of him being like, so you never believed in me, huh? Like, put him on the spot. So Greg all but loses hope after being embarrassed a few times. He starts to wonder whether or not he's actually in hell. And I sort of see like a hell dream sequence. And this is where I have Denny. Denny's in hell and he super loves it there.
Wait, does he like it or wait?
No, he loves it. Denny's super at home in hell. And so like he's part of like enjoying Greg's torture in hell when he has the vision or whatever. And then Greg meets Jack Burns again in heaven. Upon discovering that Dina has also forgotten their marriage and remains without a glow, Greg offers his help to reconcile the two of them, and then the men work together to rekindle the affections of their lost lady loves. In the end, they're successful, and God is confronted by the goddesses who no longer wish to be kept in the dark about their old lives, and in fact have several other suggestions for ways that the heaven and the universe can be improved. So forced by his own structured ruling system, God must listen and become so busy working alongside the goddesses improving the universe that he no longer has time to interfere with his subjects and their individual lives.
Oh.
So that's the main premise, and I call it Meet the Maker.
Oh. I think like the interesting thing I thought about both your guys' pitches is that they kind of inevitably involve Jack and Greg having to team up in some way, or come together, which that does make the most sense for the sequel, and clearly they did not do that in Meet the Fockers.
I think Paul and I both wanted to not repeat exactly the character arc. Like if you're going to repeat you can repeat every joke as long as you don't repeat the character arc.
Yeah.
Oh, the only other detail I wanted to mention for just trying, because I wanted to try to come up with set pieces of humiliation for Greg, but it's hard to do in heaven. But what I did come up with was the idea that, like, in his apartment or wherever they are in heaven, there is a perfection meter that they can turn the perfection of their existence up to 10. And so, like, if you turn it up to 10, and if you get a crumb on your face, the crumb, like, jumps itself away into the trash. Or, like, and I also like the idea of almost using it as like a dimmer switch, and, like, if you turn it down, the apartment gets a little messier and more cluttered, but if you turn it all the way up, it's sparkling clean, and that kind of thing. And like fun references to that throughout, where it's like, boy, the perfection level in this place is, is a little off tonight, or something like that.
And then at the end, you could definitely have a moment where, like, he allows the perfection meter to go all the way down with Pam and reveal himself for who he truly is.
And she still chooses him. And I'm thinking that, like, everybody in heaven has almost like an Apple Watch version of it. And maybe that's what God is messing with for Greg, so that it's, like, causing him problems, in places.
That's a good idea.
But I don't want to handicap myself too much. I really don't want to, like, hurt my own chances with Katie. But is Jinx in heaven?
Ooh.
It doesn't sound like Jinx is in heaven.
I mean, I feel at a very big loss here, because obviously, yes, because if it's heaven, animals are there. But I didn't come up with any bits for Jinx in heaven. I mean, I like the idea of Jinx sitting on God's lap.
But he does,
that's fair.
Lower his sunglasses occasionally and drinks wine. Does a bunch of anthropomorphic things that a cat shouldn't do.
I don't like those pitches, Steve.
Yeah.
do not do that to Jinx. He's perfect as he is in the first one. Yeah. This is an interesting, like, how does this go? Like, so we're supposed to pick one now. Is that how this goes?
Well, you are supposed to pick one. You alone.
This is tough because they are very different pitches. I feel like there's a world in which both these pitches could work in the entire canon of the Meet the Parents.
Paul's could
story.
be
That's true.
Could be a third one.
Yeah. I have to, like, I do have to go with my gut, and I think I'd have to go with Steve's pitch, because I do think
absolutely
it's tough, because I do think yours is far more original and something that I'd like to see, and that I would just be like, whoa, like, it would be crazy if Meet the Parents had that sequel. It would have been so mind-blowing. It would have definitely been inspired. Like, it would have definitely been like a whole new thing. Like,
wait, Meet the Parents sequel is Meet God? That's crazy.
You don't often see a genre leap between movies.
No,
I don't know.
It's true.
I don't know if you have seen it ever. But but no, I think that what Steve proposed was more what I wanted back when I knew there was going to be a second one. Like, that would have pleased me, which is why we do this podcast at all. You're like, yes, this could have worked.
I mean, realistically, why Steve truly won is because of the Jinx because I do think Jinx is one of the best parts of the first one. And so I can see, like, it's like, oh, of course they'll have to be in the second one. It's like, it's a bit reductive, and, like, it's kind of like, but he is so funny in the first one that it's kind of hard to not have him at all.
And I stand by
you're right.
Jack pulling off a spy mission with Jinx as his partner, and, like, Jinx having to, like, sneak into a room, like, Mission Impossible style, like, or something, like, would have been as wacky as the studio could have got, as wacky and slapsticky as they got in the sequel, but it would have been more true to, like, Jack's character.
That seems like a Jim Carrey movie, actually.
Yeah. Well, and getting to see Jack and Jinx interact by themselves in a way that isn't what you see in both movies, which is just being like, so Jinx, let's watch this video. Like, I do like that a lot, because he talks about training him in a lot of different ways, but to see it in action where it's like, and Jinx running, that's great. That's really good.
And I do really like the idea of Jack defending Greg at some point.
I mean, I am very pleased by the results here, and I think you did an excellent job.
Yeah, the winner is...
Okay, so the winner of this follow-up showdown is Totally Focked by Steve Clemmons.
So you need that assurance, do you? You prefer an emotionally shallow animal?
Not sure if people will even know to Meet the Parents sequel.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
I like that too. Anything that you guys would like to plug on your way out?
Do's and don'ts on Instagram. Mountain Dew reviews featuring myself, occasionally Paul. And Last Degree of Kevin Bacon on Spotify. It's a podcast starring.
Yes, and it's excellent.
I'm glad Steve had two things to plug.
Yeah.
He plugged it for both of us.
We'll say do's and don'ts is for Katie.
And thank you both for being the first guests on Nerds in Quarantine, our season 2. And I look forward to seeing you again regardless, but, I'd love to have you back as well. So
yeah, totally.
Other than that, we can get off the iPad and I can go eat and all that. So, but this was me keeping me, not you keeping me. I would have done this all night if need be. So thank you again. Can you deal with that?
On the next follow-up showdown.
The movie we're talking about today is 1982's Grease 2. With near and dear friends to all of our hearts, Tony Interdonato and Chris Newell.
I'm super excited about this.
I've watched it probably more than 100 times involuntarily.